Dr. Eccles Hustings. Do you want to come up, please? Hi everyone, I'm Norman Bailey. I'm 67 till Monday and I'm at another number to me. I was brought up in a small mining village in West Yorkshire. I have two sisters, one younger than me and one older than me, who I love dearly. My dad was a miner and my mum a counsellor. They fought hard and always respected people's decisions. I came to live in Salford when I was nearly 17 years old because there was little work and mills and factories were closing down in our nearest town. Although I love my birthplace, I equally love my Salford. From the moment we moved here, people accepted us and helped us to become part of the community. I have 7 children. I am a grandma, a great-grandma. Both my husband and myself began long-term fostering for Salford 25 years ago and have been adult carers for the same boys ever since. We feel so privileged that we were allowed to do this because between our birth children and our special children, our lives have been so enriched. I find as I'm getting older, I have the need to fight for my special sons and the most vulnerable people in Salford because they really are getting a rough deal all around from both government and council, especially the council who promised to put the vulnerable first, but that was a joke. Transport for our most vulnerable was stopped. This was a service that was a valuable part not only to the disabled but our elderly too, and for our special children who attend special schools. It also badly affected mums and dads and carers. It meant we have little time to do things we cannot while our loved ones are at home. The time from pick-up to dropping off was an extra bit of respite, but we don't have this anymore. In the last 12 months, I have attended meetings with the council to put our case forward, peaceful protests, court hearings, and arranged rallies on the lawn to try and be heard. But were we no? Just told, if we make a mess or damage the grass, we will be sued. Yet it came to light that this council, our Salford Labour Council, had money that would go to businesses that to them were far important. But I can assure you, they were not. Myself and my friend, we were so disgusted that we started our website, www.searchsalford.org, and a Facebook group called Search, which means seeking, empowerment, advocacy, rewards and challenges. The only people that came and stood by us were the members of TUS, Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition Party, which was started up in 2010 by the late Bob Crow, who sadly passed away in 2014. Never once did they let us down, and I decided I would look into what they stood for. I was really surprised because they are what I once saw in Labour, someone for the working man. Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition Party are totally against austerity. They do not believe that cuts have to be made. We also have to remember, we didn't cause the deficit, so why are we being asked to pay? My fight is one that is not going away, so the only option I had was to get off my backside and fight for both my sons and all those in Salford that are not able to speak for themselves. The disabled, the elderly, carers, homeless, the list goes on, and so will my fight. May I finish by saying, thank you so much for taking time to come here today and listen to what we all have to say.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We're now going to invite Rebecca Bailey from the Labour Party to come and speak to us. Rebecca has been a lawyer in Salford, specialising in health issues. Welcome.
Thanks everybody for coming today and listening to hear us speak. Now there's a lot of talk in this election about specific issues, but the election's much more important than that. It's about choosing what kind of society you want to live in. Now when I was growing up, I experienced stark inequality. I became angry. I started working in a pawn shop at 16, a jewellery pawn shop, not a dodgy pawn shop. And There was a lady that came in regularly called Tina. She was a grandmother. She was trying to help her daughter, a single parent. And she came in, she pawned everything she had just to go and buy food at the Iceland next door. I was angry. This wasn't the kind of society I wanted to live in. But today it's worse. Across Salford and Eccles, we're seeing food banks and payday lenders on our streets, being used by desperate people who more often than not are in work that's paid so little they can't make ends meet. We've got 0 hours contracts where people don't know from one week to the next whether they've got a job or not. Exploitative so-called apprenticeships with no real job or prospects at the end. Benefit sanctions for being a few minutes late for an interview. Now what really frightens me to the core is that the government and parts of the media are encouraging us to fight within our communities, to blame the low paid, to blame the disabled, to blame public sector workers, to blame immigrants, when we all know that the real problem lies in the way our economy is being exploited by a select few. We didn't cause the financial crisis, they did, and some of them don't even pay their taxes. Well, Labour is going to change that. We're going to clamp down on tax avoidance and ask those earning $150,000 to pay a little more so that those at the top really do pay their fair share. We'll have a tax on bankers' bonuses to fund a jobs guarantee for people who can't find work. We'll invest in our NHS through a mansion tax on homes worth over £2 million and a levy on tobacco companies. But it's not just tax that's an issue. It's the way employees are treated. I grew up watching my mum and dad struggle, facing round after round of redundancies, crippled by debt, not knowing from one week to the next whether they'd be able to make ends meet. It's worse today. Workers deserve decent terms and conditions. 0 hours contracts should be banned, and quite frankly, they shouldn't even be given the word contract at all, because that implies that there are obligations on both sides. But bosses don't have any obligations. Now we're going to change this. We're going to ban exploitative 0 hour contracts, and we're going to raise the minimum wage to £8 an hour, but that's just the start. We're going to encourage and incentivise employers to pay a living wage, and we're going to stop and make it illegal to undercut wages by allowing companies to exploit migrant workers. And then there's our NHS. Well, what can I say? That's been privatised before our very eyes, stripped of funding, left out to dry, hanging on a knife edge so that the so-called private sector can wade in and save it. But look, we've got the fight of our lives now, and if we get another 5 years of this Tory-led coalition, there won't be an NHS left. It's as simple as that. Now we're going to change that. Labour's got a different plan. We're going to stop the creeping privatisation of the NHS. We're going to build it up so it's got time to care. We're going to invest in it. We're going to fund 8,000 more GPs, 20,000 more nurses, 3,000 more midwives. We're going to make sure that you get a GP appointment within 48 hours. We're going to make it fit for the future. We're going to bring together services for physical health, mental health and social care into a single system built around the individual. We're going to make sure that the NHS is always the preferred provider, and we'll make sure that the NHS becomes about patient care once again, not competition and profit. But what about education? Our schools and our nursery system in Salford and Eccles is struggling. There aren't enough places. People are having to go outside of the area, and the future for our younger people at secondary school is looking bleak. And then there's higher education. Well, you shouldn't have to go to university to have a future. There are people falling through the cracks of our system that should have their skills and abilities picked up on. Well, we're going to change it. We're going to create a path to success for our younger people. We're going to introduce a gold standard system of technical education and training, and the guarantee of a real apprenticeship for every school leaver that's got the grades. We're going to protect the education budget, and we're going to raise teaching standards, making sure that there are smaller class sizes for 5, 6 and 7-year-olds. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot about growth in the news recently, but the link between growth is broken and better living standards is broken. Many people in work need to rely on housing benefit to pay their rent. Energy bills are spiralling out of control. Local authorities like Salford are having their budgets cut by 2/3, whilst authorities down south are seeing an increase in what they're getting to spend. That's inequality, and it has to be stopped. Now we're going to freeze energy prices, and we're going to reform the broken energy market. market so it works for the people, not for the shareholders of energy companies. We're going to give more powers to our regions and devolve up to £30 billion, and we're going to address the economic inequalities that see authorities down south getting more money whilst the ones up north are left out high and dry. We're going to build 200,000 more homes a year in the public and the private sectors to address the housing shortage. And in terms of the private rented sector, we're going to make sure that people are entitled to a 3-year minimum tenancy and that their rent is capped so that they know exactly where they're up to. And last, but by no means least, we're going to ban and we're going to get rid of the bedroom tax. Now, I'm standing as a Labour candidate today because I'm fighting for a fairer society where we all succeed, not just those at the top. I want my son and all our future in Salford and all our children in Salford and Eccles to have a future and an education, regardless of their financial background. I want our pensioners to enjoy the future they deserve after having put so much into our society. I want an economy and a political strategy that stops the race to the bottom in skills and wages and quite frankly says our people are worth more than this. If you want this too, if you want a system where rewards are fairly shared, then the only choice on May the 7th is to vote Labour. Thanks everybody.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Now I'm going to invite Greg Downs. Greg's background is that he has been a vicar for 20 years and he has been a chaplain mainly in education. And I'm delighted that Greg is here. Thank you for coming. And he is going to speak to us now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, as already been said, I'm a vicar, which is kind of unusual because vicars, particularly Church of England vicars, they were forbidden for standing for Parliament for 200 years, from 2001 from 1801, because they were considered medalists in Parliament, through to 2001 when there was the repeal of the Clergy Disqualification Act that allowed vicars to stand. And I thought about going into politics when I was a young man and decided I felt a calling to ordination. I still do, and so I pursued that for the past few years. But I felt a stirring for the past few years to actually push some doors to see about entering public life. And one of the incentives for that, I think, was the all-time low confidence that seems to be about in terms of public confidence within politics itself. So where I'm vicar in York at the moment, it's a church called St Michael Belfry York, and we're famous for being the church where Guy Fawkes was baptised in the early 16th century. So it said of Guy Fawkes that he was the last man to enter Parliament with honest intentions. And anyway, maybe some of us can change that, not just me, maybe some of my colleagues here as well. But people don't have public confidence in our politicians anymore. They're kind of the butt of all the jokes, aren't they? How can you tell when a politician is lying? The answer, simple, his lips are moving, or her lips are moving. There's all these jokes because there's an all-time, I guess it's been the case for decades, but I think it's particularly difficult right now. So one of my incentives anyway to join the political sphere was not to create some idealistic utopian world, because I recognise that many politicians have promised the world and then failed to deliver, and disillusionment is easy to set in. But I do think all of us, regardless of whether we have a faith or whether we don't have a faith or not, all of us have a responsibility to do our best to make society as good a place as it could be, as an equitous place as it could be, a harmonious place as it can be, and pass on a legacy to our generation, the generation that will come after us. So why am I a Conservative? Why am I standing in this particular election? Well, I believe that the last 5 years, the coalition, whilst obviously not without its critics, it has done a good job in terms of dealing with the situation that was inherited 5 years ago. And I don't want to get into the blame game. Politicians are very good at that. We can blame the big bankers, and clearly there were big mistakes that went wrong there. That many of my colleagues obviously would want to massively put the blame at the Labour administration, who were in power for 30 years and famously left the note that said we've run out of money, which is now a joke apparently. That was just a joke about that. wasn't serious anyway. We could get into the blame game, but actually the fact is the situation was pretty dire 5 years ago. And it's far from perfect now, but I believe it is better than it was 5 years ago. So in terms of the economy, the deficit has been halved. Now it's not completely gone, of course it's not, but I think to work at reducing the deficit and to embrace the path that we did to make that possible was a necessity. When it's sometimes said, well, it was Nicola Sturgeon, wasn't it, who said that Conservatives are the party of austerity, they're the party obviously of not. And my colleague here, the Labour Party, that's austerity light, is what Nicola Sturgeon said. I don't think it's the case that any of us think, oh yes, I'm the party of austerity, I like austerity. None of us, of course, like austerity, but it's a necessary evil to get to be where we need to be. I noticed on BBC News just the other day, the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, when she was speaking in Washington, she said it's obvious that what's happening in the UK has worked. Supposedly speaking as a monetarist from a neutral perspective, what's happening in the UK has worked. In many ways, what's happened in the UK is the envy of many of our fellow nations within the European Union in terms of being on path to dealing with the huge economic problems that we're facing as a nation. When it comes to jobs, I read recently again on BBC News, 73.4% of people in employment, that's the employment rate, the highest since 1971. Again, this is BBC News, that unemployment is lower since 2008. Jobless people out of work, it's dropped 76,000 in the past 3 months, the 3 months running up until February. That comes from the Office of National Statistics. Again, weekly earnings rose 1.8% in that same period, the 3 months running up to February this year, from the Office of National Statistics. So it's not surprising then that Samuel Tombs, senior UK economist, said this. He said, the UK's employment miracle shows no sign of drawing to a close. When it comes to our health service, the present government, the Conservative Party part of it, has said that the $8 billion that's been asked for in terms of investment in our NHS is something that we're confident that we can raise and that we will raise. I was chatting with a friend of mine, Martin Farrick, a guy who's at university with, who's a consultant paediatrician at Wigan Hospital, and he's not my politics at all. He's more my colleague on the right. That's his flavour of politics. But he said that Hope Hospital in Salford was, along with his own, he would say that, wouldn't he? Wigan Hospital, along with his own, one of the 2 best hospitals in the region. It's something that we can be proud of. And of course, education. My wife's a former doctor, she's a doctor, so I've got a concern there with health. Also a concern with education as someone who was a teacher before I got ordained. The government at the moment is looking to, it's planned to invest 18 billion in new schools and infrastructure in our nation, and since 2010, the creation of 2.2 million new apprenticeships. I think we're going in the right direction, so my message would be not that we're sorted, not that we're the perfect party, but actually we're going in the right direction, and if it's not broken, then why fix it? And so I would request for another 5 years to be able to carry on the good work that we started. Thank you very much.
The way that we should show our either appreciation or not appreciation of someone speaking is either to applaud or not to applaud, rather than another. So please, as members of the, I was going to call you a congregation, of course you're not a congregation, are you? The members of the audience, would you please observe that? And then it's very nice to have Paul with us. Paul is a local businessman, and he has been part of the army for many years. He was part of the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gents. I am not going to rattle off the UKIP manifesto to you. Okay? I'll just set the record, I'll say that. I'm here to talk about Salford, why I'm standing for UKIP in Salford, and obviously my background. Now, as you can guess, with a surname like Doyle, I'm from Ireland. my family are immigrants into Salford. The first part of my family who moved to Salford dug the docks out, Irish navvies. The rest of my family that followed came here and served in the Great War, the Lancashire Fusiliers, the Salford Powers Battalions. My great uncle John Howard, he won the Military Cross serving in the 9th Battalion, Salford Powers Lancashire Fusiliers. Since then, the rest of the family moved over and we settled in Salford. Now, originally my family were members of the Labour movement. We were proud members of the Labour movement, and up until recently, I was a Labour supporter. I joined the army in 1996, and from 1996 to 2010, I was involved with every major conflict we found ourselves in, ranging from Northern Ireland, Bosnia and Kosovo, Iraq during the invasion, and tours of Afghanistan. When I came home from my last tour of Afghanistan 5 years ago, I saw a change in our community, something I didn't like. And I could not agree with Labour not allowing a referendum on the EU. At the end of the day, it's democracy. The British people are long overdue that vote. Whether you agree with Europe or not, we should be given that vote. However, I don't want to last one why you think that, that's so moving on. So anyway, I came on to Salford. I built a business in Salford, just round the corner on Green Lane, opposite the old ordnance factory. I employ 28 local people in Salford. I also engage with the Work Solutions programme with Salford Council and help long-term unemployed get at least some form of experience, of not being able to work a long time, on their CVs. I've engaged with the Regular Forces Employment Agency, the British Legion, and in the last 4 years I've helped over 100 ex-service personnel find work. And that's not through my business, that's just through assisting them. Now I got asked to stand for UKIP, and I said yes I will, because I'm disillusioned in Salford. A lot of people, and those I speak to now on the campaign, are disillusioned. I can't stand by why this great city goes down the drain. At the end of the day, we do have high levels of youth unemployment. We can't keep pushing and saying university, university, university. In Germany, it's pat on the back if you go down the route of becoming an apprentice and in the trades. Salford was built on manufacturing. That's where our history comes from the Industrial Revolution through to recently. We've got to get industry back into Salford. I'm trying to do my bit as a small business owner, but we need big business back here. And I agree, 0 hours contracts, they should be gone. And just for the record, I don't have a 0 hours contract policy in my business either. But we need to get big business. And I use the example of, we look over at Halewood, Jaguar Land Rover. They employ apprenticeships in the local community, employ thousands of people around that community. We need something like that here in Salford. We need a beacon for us to get our pride back into this city. Because when I look around youngsters, I look around people are disillusioned. We've lost pride. It's gone. We need to get our pride back. And by doing that, we need to get industry back here and start building again. Not building houses, but building business to give employment, decent contracts, decent wages, and we can take it from there. Now, I said I want to touch on the UKIP manifesto, and I won't. All I can say is you'll hear my answers to your questions in what we've got laid out here, which obviously will relate to the UKIP manifesto. If I'm elected, I'm not perfect by the way, I'm still learning, but if I'm elected, you'll give me 5 years and let's see what I can do. If I don't accomplish my goals of bringing mass employment back to Salford in those 5 years, and get rid of me after 5 years. But give me a chance. It's time for a change here in Salford. It's always been Labour, Run Council, always been a Labour MP. It does need a change, and the people are screaming out for a change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, those speeches have come from lots of different perspectives, not just political, but personal as well. It's obvious that it's very difficult for people, for example, who to give a speech. It's really, really hard, but what we appreciate is the integrity and the care that people have shown. And I think that's obvious from all our candidates. And that is part of our democratic process. And so we thank you all for coming and for giving your speech. We're now going to have the questions. And the questions have been given from different members of the public. And what I'm going to do is, in each case, invite the person. We've established that every person giving the question, who has written and sent in a question, is actually here today. And so we're going to ask those people to come up in turn. And I'm going to go from one end to the other. The next question, I'm going to go from that end to that end. So that is fair without being complicated. Our first questions are about the NHS. So we're going to start with questions on your format, ladies and gentlemen, of 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then we're going back to 1 afterwards. And so is Steve Hopkins here, please? Steve, would you like to come up and read your question? Thank you.
Having recently collected signatures for a national non-political campaign to protect the NHS from further privatisation, almost all of those approached were happy to sign, but many people did not seem to trust that any major party would stop privatisation or continue privatisation. Why do you think that is?
This is a question about possible privatisation. And people that can't, the members of the public do not feel as though they can trust any political party. And Steve said, why do you think they can't trust any political party? Right, so perhaps it's not good.
Well, they've lost faith in the NHS over subsequent governments, and that's from Labour, obviously straight through to Democrats and Conservative coalition we've seen. What have we seen in the recent 15, 17 years? There has been long waiting times. There has been a letdown on waiting for operations, etc., etc. Now, you don't expect me to say this from the political party I'm coming from, but at the end of the day, we've also seen a massive rise in our population. Obviously, that's a population growth that would happen anyway, but we've seen a massive rise in population, so mass immigration from certainly Eastern Europe. Not certainly the Commonwealth, I'm about open door immigration from Eastern Europe. That has put a strain on the NHS. And that, in turn, has made local people obviously lose faith in the service, because the service isn't delivering, the system is under strain. It does need more money into it, it needs reorganising, but at the end of the day, it also needs to have adequate controls for the people using the system, those who pay tax and national insurance, obviously to have priority on that, so not people coming over here, obviously benefit of tourism.
To answer the question head on, why is there kind of a cynicism across parties? I think because take the last 2 administrations, obviously the present coalition, one with the Labour administrations before it, then the issue of having to outsource some of the NHS's work is something that isn't new and just begun in the past 5 years, but something that predates that. And it's important to put it like that because in terms of the privatisation of the NHS, no party that I know of is saying, yes, we need to privatise the NHS. This is one issue, at least, there seems to be a consensus on, that actually we're not doing that. So what we're talking about, not privatisation of the NHS, but outsourcing certain things, outsourcing certain operations that are being outsourced to private hospitals. Now, as I said, that's not something that started in the past 5 years, something that predated that. Why is that the case? Well, purely necessity. It's been expediency, hasn't it, that the system that we have is massively under pressure, partly, as we just heard, in terms of increased population, but also just in terms of advances in health. My grandma died at 69, my granddad died at 71, and it took me years to figure out. I just thought people died at 70, I just assumed, I did for years, thought well, some people get to 70 and they die. And then I sort of began to realise, actually, the average age was at the moment 79 for a woman, 81 for a man. And people are living longer in terms of because of health advances. So it's an issue that affects all the parties. And I guess I want to preempt the next question in terms of what do we do about it. But that's the issue in a nutshell.
Well, I was one of those people out collecting signatures, and I can understand why people have lost faith in politicians on the NHS. We were told before the 2010 general election that we no top-down reorganisation of the NHS, and then there was so big that people say you can see it from outer space. There's been a radical shift towards privatisation, and what I can say categorically is that the Labour Party has set out that it will remove the creeping privatisation from the NHS, whilst being realistic at the same time. I would love to be able to promise the moon on a stick today and say we're going to reverse all privatisation, we're going to bring it all back into public ownership. But given the budget that we're going to have on May the 7th and the contracts that are in place, that isn't going to happen. We're going to have to wait for those contracts to expire, and we're going to ensure that when they do, any providers are an NHS body if there is one available. If there isn't one available, then I would say that we need to be putting more money into our NHS to train up these departments, to create new NHS bodies to provide these services, and that will only come when we start clamping down on tax avoidance and making sure that we've got that money going back into the public purse. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that we are against the creeping privatisation of the NHS.
So in other words, what you're saying is you're going to put more managers in place.
Sorry, could we just, people will be invited at certain points to say something. Do you mind sitting down? Thank you.
As you all know, I'm just coming to learn everything that I'm doing. So all I can say is, it's only going to be a short answer. I can assure you that TUS really are against it being privatised. We don't agree with it at all. We all know that the National Health Service is in crisis, and this in itself is a crime. Many people are experiencing this. We only have to look at the way our elderly are being treated. Look in the hospitals, we see elderly in corridors, not being seen to. And we're all too quick to blame the immigrants. Immigration is not an issue here. Yes, it's a lot of our doctors and nurses are from the country. These are the people that help keep our National Health Service going. And there should not be any place in National Health Service for profit. It should be done for all the people. We should all have a fair share in being able to say. And can you imagine if privatisation goes ahead, how many people are going to lose in our families because we just cannot afford to pay for their services?
Well, I think the reason that most people don't believe that any party can reverse these privatizations is probably because all of the major parties have been involved to some degree or another. It was the Labour Party that introduced private finance initiatives, and it's the Conservative Party, in conjunction with the Liberal Democrats, that have introduced the top-down reorganisation and increased the waiting times and things most recently. It should also be noted that the proportion of the NHS budget that has gone into administration as opposed to care has dramatically increased over time. I am a huge supporter of the NHS. Without it, I wouldn't be here to talk to you today. And I can tell you that if I was elected, I would do everything in my power to protect it and to reverse all privatisation.
What we're going to do now is we're going to go through the next three questions which have been sent in advance. And after those three questions, I will invite the gentleman who stood up at the back. If your question has not been asked or the subject answered by then, I will invite you to come up. Is that right? So I'm now going to invite Marion Hunch, who has a particular question. If those asking questions could keep to the script that they sent in, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
I'd just like to say, Madam Chairman, that there is a long history of heckling at public meetings, and this meeting is far better behaved than the Prime Minister's question time with the MPs. To get used to it. My question does relate to the petition that over 800 people in this constituency